It was an early afternoon. Mercury Black felt both bored and restless, and since he couldn't come up with any good idea of what to do to keep himself from getting more bored, then he came up with one idea: do some training. And since he was a skilled assassin, and since another thing is that he didn't want to lose his skills, so he thought, why not to do some training to maintain his skills? So he left his home, went to a small forest nearby, and did some training. While he was training, he was just kicking and other things that he liked to do to maintain his skills. But suddenly, as he was training, this strange sound in the distance and a light that flashed by that blinded him only temporarily. He first believed that he was targeted by another assassin that who had someone put a target on him. As the light vanished only lasted for a few seconds, he looked around, prepared for being attacked by maybe one or two assassins. But nothing happened. Even though he was really secured that he would defeat any enemy that was approached him. But since nothing happened, he went off in the direction of where this sound and this light came from. He thought maybe it was someone else there that could have been a potential target that he was looking for. But when he arrived to this place, he did see something. But it wasn't a human, or at least one thing that he didn't expect to find. And that was a strange being laying with its face down on the ground, but it was not even a human. It was this humanoid being, but this particular creature, or what it's called, was wearing clothes. And he had no idea what these were, so he walked over and just turned it over and saw it was some sort of animal. He literally backed off a little bit. He didn't expect to see this, because he first believed this might be a new type of Grim. But then he realized it wasn't that. Because most Grims look terrifying, horrifying. But this looked more as a beautiful young female of some sort, and he even didn't recognize the species. But as he was looking at this being or this creature, it slowly opened its eyes and looked at him, and he was preparing to attack just in case. But it didn't seem to be doing anything. And just sat up on the ground and looked around, and holding one of his hands to his head, and just felt dizzy for some reason. She asked him, where is he? Or where is she? Where is she? And who is he? At first, he was a little bit surprised that this being could actually talk, but then noticed that this being had clothes. So it would have been surprised if this being could talk. And he said only that she was in a forest, and well, at least in an area where this forest was located, and he said his name was Mercury Black. He asked the same question what her name was, and she told him that her name was Amy Rose. And she said that she never heard of the place what he did mention. So she asked him if this place is even anywhere on Mobius. And he just looked at her surprised and a little bit curious and asked, what is Mobius? This is Remnant, he said. She looked at him with big eyes and thought that something had happened. But then she was asking him if he had ever heard of someone called Dr. Eggman. And Mercury laughed and was like, no, is that like what, a talking egg? That was really surprised her. But as he was standing up, she felt a bit dizzy. And then, for some reason, he couldn't explain this to himself, even then. He asked her if she wanted to come along with him to his place nearby. Even though the Amy wasn't much as the type of just follow strangers into a new place. But since she didn't have no other option, so she did. There, he just gave her something to drink and sat down on the couch or on the bed, wherever it was. And she just sat there silent while he sat on other, just on the opposite side, and told her open more about himself, that he was assassin. That made her scared, because she knows what assassin is. But he assured her that she is not a target of him, or if she would have been target, he would have taken care of the problem, taking care of her almost immediately when he found her. And she was a little bit surprised, and then he started to ask her more questions about herself, like about this world she came from, and more about this called Eggman. And by laughing about it, it's like he thought maybe this was this giant talking egg or something. She explained that Eggman was a man, but he was almost shaped as body as an egg, which was called an Eggman or something. And after a while, Amy felt a little bit more calmer around Mercury. Even though Mercury himself could be a little bit carefree and jokes around when he's around that. But when she said something about assassins might not be as tough as it seems, his friendly manner changed almost quickly to almost an insult. And he told her not to mention that again, because he really takes his duty, his work as an assassin real serious. And he doesn't take it kindly that other people talk so badly of assassins. She apologized, but she said only mention it like only refer as that some assassins may not be good at their work, because she didn't was talking about him, because she didn't even know how good she is that he's an assassin, and that actually somehow calmed him down. And he joked, "Yeah, that makes sense. Some other assassins are completely bad, or others are medium or mediocre, but I know one of the best. I'm one of the top assassins there is," he said with a big smile. But after she felt a little bit better, she told him that she probably just had that she could leave and maybe find somewhere else to stay. But before she could leave, Mercury said more friendly tone that she could stay there at least the next day, since it was late in the afternoon and she didn't know where else to go, and she probably would be hungry. Which in that second her stomach started to growl and she realized he had a point. So she decided for a night. She made some food from both of them, and he was actually very impressed of her cooking. She told him back home she was one of the best friends of her friends that could cook and bake a lot. But that night, when she was laying on the couch, she was talking to herself, well, it's more as a whisper, because she didn't want to wake up Mercury. Because she wasn't sure if she could actually trust him. After all, he's an assassin. He could simply kill her in her sleep or something. But that didn't happen, because it was around 2 in the morning, she had fallen asleep. And in fact, she didn't even leave the next day. In fact, she stayed around for the next couple of days. And one day, when she was just around, she saw that Mercury's legs was not even real legs, those mechanical ones. And he explained that is his weapons. She was a bit surprised, but then she explained back in her home world, like this kind of things wasn't that uncommon. Like having a mechanical arm or mechanical leg or even part of his face mechanical or something. That told him to be a little bit more impressed of that. But for some reason, when Mercury was around Amy, he felt less calm. She was actually willing to cook him lunch, dinner, or even just make some snacks for him. And even when he was just outside doing some training himself, he was actually very impressed that Amy watched, or just stood there or sat down watching him training. In fact, she impressed him that she even offered to be one of his sparring match partner. And at first, Amy had a little bit tough against him, but she actually was quickly to adapt to his skills and his movements. And Mercury was actually a bit surprised and a little bit appreciated her willingness to be his partner in sparring. But he was impressed how fast she was adapting to his movements and his techniques. But after about almost 2 months, he actually started to feel a little bit different around Amy, because at this point he was expecting her to just leave, but ever since she had been staying there for 2 months and just taking care of things for him, helping to cook some food and even being a sparring partner, he started to feel a bit attracted towards her. After all, it was really something. But after being nearly around him for such a long time herself, Amy started to realize maybe that she has feelings for him. But there was another thing about it, because back home, she had another someone that she had a big feelings for. But she knows without the Chaos Emeralds that she was the cause of her end up in this world, without them, without any other type of things that could help her to send her back to her own home, there was no way for her to reunite it with her true love. So eventually, her feelings for that one faded. And after just about 6 months of been living with Mercury, her feelings for him had been replaced by his. But she didn't tell him that, of course, because she didn't expecting that he would fall in love with someone like her. Because she thought maybe that he was just more like a friend to her, but one day, after being 6 months of been living together, Mercury asked her something about her, if she had any plans to leave. But she shook her head and said no, because she had been got used to living with him, and she didn't have anywhere else to go, to be honest, she said. So Amy said that she wanted to stay behind at his place if he was willing to let her. He smiled and said yeah, because he very much enjoyed her cooking. After all, himself wasn't even that good at cooking as much as hers. His was at least decent that he only ate some of the things that the magic could cook. But Amy, she was a skilled cook. She could cook almost anything for him. Soup, stew, anything actually. So he allowed her to stay. And she did ask him if she was actually his maid or housekeeper, but he shook his head and said, no, I'm not even that type of person to have you here. I mean, you're free to go at any time you want to. But eventually, only about a couple of weeks after that conversation, Amy decided that she needed to at least tell him how she felt, even though that she might have this response of being rejected. So she decided to tell him, and she did. And she was actually surprised that he did mention that he liked almost her in the same way. And they start dating after that. And after being dating for almost about 2 years, Mercury decided to quit as an assassin, because he didn't want to put Amy in any form of danger as other assassins would take him. Of course, it was hard for him to just simply leave to work as an assassin. But after a while, after 2 years of being living as not as an assassin, he had moved on. But there was still another problems that happened. Eventually, Amy and Mercury left his home and moved to somewhere else, to a more bigger place. Amy was aware of his reputation as an assassin, and most people probably was aware of him as one. And most people wasn't aware that he quit, that he was a former assassin. So it was hard for them to even to move to one place that they could live in peace. But after a while of living in one place, they were left alone. And eventually, Amy had convinced the locals that Mercury was no longer assassin, that he was more peaceful. And for some reason, he actually started to open up this small school for martial art training. It was actually a big hit, but at first there was a lot of skepticals about in the community that Mercury was only training because they believed that he was training the students as to become future generations of assassins. But he told them that it's not that at all. But after been living in this town for about a year, Amy and Mercury decided to get married. And they did. They even have a small close wedding for just a few friends that they had got to know in this particular town. It was actually not that bad for them both. They decided to have just a simple small life together. After being married for about 3 years, Amy and Mercury wanted to start a family, but since it was impossible for them to have any children of their own, but thanks for them, there was actually an orphanage in town, and they decided to adopt at least some children from there. They adopted a boy and a girl that were siblings. The boy was named Max, and the girl name was Nova. The girl very much liked Amy right away because she could sense her mother instincts from her. Max, he was actually very much attached to his new father, Mercury. And Max, he was really fast on learning of martial art. And he was actually one among the new students at the new martial art school in town. Eventually, when Max was older, he actually took over the school after Mercury retired. And Max, well, he eventually got married to a young woman, and they have 2 sons of their own. And both their sons eventually became masters of martial arts. And Nova, she was eventually wanted to be a baker of her own because Amy has showed her such great passion in baking. And Nova, she was actually happy to have found her true purpose. And eventually, she did marry a man who was a baker in town, and they even had 2 daughters of their own. During this time, Amy has still missed her old home, of course, but knowing that it was impossible for her to get home, without any magical way for her to get back to Mobius, she had actually fully accepted Remnant as her new home, especially ever since she started dating Mercury. But being married with him, it was another thing that she actually couldn't be happier about. Even Mercury himself was just happy to have met Amy all those years ago. And this is how Mercury Black and Amy Rose found their true love, got a family together. The end.